The morning light filtered through the crystal windows of the Galactic Council building on Nexus Prime. Ambassador Sarah Chen straightened her simple blue uniform and walked through corridors filled with beings from across the galaxy. Tall, elegant Zephyrians glided past on silent feet, their silver skin gleaming. Massive Korthak warriors stomped by in heavy armor, their tusks catching the light. Graceful Volani floated nearby, their tentacles moving in complex patterns as they spoke in musical tones. And then there were the humans, always polite, always quiet, always ready to help. Sarah had been the human representative for 3 years now. She had watched her people get pushed around, insulted, and ignored in every major decision. When the mining rights for the Kepler system were divided up last month, humans got the worst asteroids, the ones with dangerous radiation and little valuable ore. When trading routes were established through the spiral arm, human ships were given the longest, most dangerous paths. When colony worlds were assigned, humans received planets that other species had rejected. Every time, the human delegation smiled and accepted their fate. They never complained. They never demanded better treatment. They just said thank you and moved on. The other species had noticed this pattern. In the corridors, Sarah often heard whispered comments. The Korthak called humans soft meat that thinks. The Zephyrians referred to them as the servant species. Even the usually diplomatic Volani sometimes joked about those amusing mammals who bend without breaking. Sarah entered the main council chamber and took her seat at the far end of the massive curved table. The human seat was small and placed where everyone else could easily ignore it. She had requested better placement many times. The requests were always politely denied. Today's meeting was about the ongoing dispute between the Korthak Empire and the Zephyrian Alliance. Both sides wanted control of the rich worlds in the Outer Rim. As usual, human colonies in that area would be the first to suffer if war broke out. Council leader Thane, a massive Korthak with scars covering half his face, stood up to address the chamber. His voice rumbled like distant thunder. The Zephyrian Alliance continues to steal what belongs to the Empire, he growled. Their illegal mining operations in our territory must end. If they do not stop, we will remove them by force. The Zephyrian representative, a thin being named Veltar, rose gracefully from his seat. His voice was cold and precise. The Empire speaks of ownership, but these worlds belong to no one. Our operations are legal under galactic law. If the Korthak wish to start another war over resources they cannot properly use, they will face the consequences. The two sides argued for hours. Other species took sides based on trade agreements and old alliances. The Volani tried to find compromise. The merchant guilds worried about profit losses. The military powers calculated battle outcomes. Nobody asked the humans what they thought. Sarah sat quietly through it all, taking notes on her small data pad. She watched the politics play out, saw the lies and hidden agendas, noted which species would benefit from war and which would lose. Her people had learned to be very good observers over the past 50 years. When the session finally ended with no resolution, Sarah approached the Volani mediator, Ambassador Sindar. She had always found the Volani to be the most reasonable species in the council. The human colonies in the disputed region, New Geneva, Terra Nova, Prosperity Station, they have over 2 million civilians. If war breaks out, could the council arrange for evacuation time? Sindar's tentacles moved in what humans had learned was the equivalent of a shrug. My dear human, wars are messy things. Civilian casualties are unfortunate but expected. Your people chose to settle in dangerous areas. Perhaps they should consider relocating to safer worlds. We were assigned those worlds by this council, Sarah replied, keeping her voice calm. We built communities there because that's where we were told to go. Yes, well, circumstances change, Sindar said dismissively. I'm sure your people will adapt. They always do. It's quite admirable, really, how resilient humans can be. Sarah nodded and walked away. In the corridor, she passed a group of young Zephyrian diplomats. They were laughing about something, their silver voices ringing off the walls. "Did you see the human today?" one of them said. "Still trying to matter in galactic politics. It's almost cute." "My grandfather served on the council when they first arrived," another replied. "He said they used to have this strange idea that all species should be treated equally." Can you imagine? 50 years, and they still haven't learned their place, the first one laughed. "At least they're useful for the dangerous jobs no one else wants to do." Sarah kept walking, her face showing nothing. But her datapad was recording everything, just like always. Every insult, every dismissive comment, every casual cruelty was carefully documented and filed away. That evening, Sarah returned to the human embassy, a modest building in the diplomatic quarter. She sent her daily report back to Earth, just like she did every day. The message was brief and professional, summarizing the day's events and the growing tension between the Korthak and Zephyrians. But attached to that report was another file, a detailed analysis of military movements, political alliances, and economic vulnerabilities. Trade route schedules, fleet positions, resource dependencies, psychological profiles of key leaders. For 50 years, humans had been the galaxy's punching bag. They took every insult, accepted every bad deal, and smiled while doing the jobs others refused to touch. The galaxy saw this as weakness. The galaxy was wrong. Humans had been learning, watching, preparing. Every slight was remembered. Every tactical detail was recorded. Every weakness was catalogued. Sarah looked out her office window at the city lights of Nexus Prime. Millions of aliens from hundreds of worlds, all confident in their superiority over the quiet human species. They had no idea what was coming, because humans had learned the most important lesson the galaxy could teach, that nice guys finish last, and the universe only respects strength. For 50 years, humanity had been nice. That was about to change. The war started exactly as Sarah had predicted in her reports. 3 months after that council meeting, Korthak battle fleets struck Zephyrian mining stations in the Outer Rim. The Zephyrians responded by destroying Korthak supply convoys. Within weeks, the conflict spread across 6 star systems. And just like always, human colonies found themselves caught in the middle. Captain Maria Santos stood on the observation deck of New Geneva Station, watching the agricultural fields spread out below. The planet was one of humanity's most successful colonies. Rich soil, perfect climate, and hard-working farmers who had turned empty land into a garden world that fed refugees from 3 different wars. The station's communication array buzzed with an incoming transmission. Maria's second officer, Lieutenant Park, looked up from his console with worry in his eyes. "Captain, we're receiving a message from the Korthak First Fleet. They're demanding to speak with our leader." Maria straightened her uniform and walked to the main viewer. The screen filled with the image of General Krextar, a massive Korthak whose black armor was covered in battle scars. His yellow eyes burned with barely controlled rage. "Human colony leader," he growled, not bothering with proper titles. "This world sits in territory that now belongs to the Korthak Empire. You have 24 hours to evacuate all personnel and equipment. After that time, we begin mining operations." Maria kept her voice steady. "General, this is a farming world with 12,000 civilian residents. We need more time to organize an evacuation. Our harvest season just began. If we can complete it, the food will help feed the refugee populations from this war." Krextar's laugh was like grinding metal. "Food? You worry about plants when empires clash? The soil of this world contains rare minerals needed for our war effort. The Zephyrians have already stolen too much from us. We will not wait while soft humans pick vegetables. General, please, just 1 month. We'll give you detailed mining surveys of the entire planet. Our geological teams have been here for 20 years. We know where all the valuable deposits are located. Surely that information is worth a few weeks. The Korthak general's eyes narrowed. You offer us data about our own conquest? How generous. His voice dripped with sarcasm. You will leave now, or we will remove you. Choose quickly, human. The transmission ended. Maria stared at the black screen, her hands clenched into fists. Around her, the station crew waited for orders. These were good people. Farmers, teachers, engineers who had built something beautiful on this world. Lieutenant Park checked his instruments. Captain, I'm picking up 17 Korthak heavy cruisers entering the system. They're moving into bombardment formation. Maria activated the colony-wide communication system. All residents of New Geneva, this is Captain Santos. We have a situation that requires immediate evacuation procedures. Please report to your assigned gathering points and await further instructions. For the next 18 hours, human transport ships worked frantically to evacuate the population. Families grabbed what they could carry and left behind everything else. Homes built with their own hands, schools where their children had learned to read, farms that had fed thousands. But the Korthak grew impatient. With 6 hours still remaining in their deadline, General Krekstar sent a final message to the planet. The Empire has decided to demonstrate the price of inefficiency. Perhaps other humans will learn to move faster. The bombardment began at dawn. The first energy beams struck the main agricultural processing centers. Grain silos that had taken decades to build vanished in balls of superheated plasma. The farmers who had stayed behind to help with the harvest were caught in the firestorm. Maria watched from orbit as explosions bloomed across the farmland like deadly flowers. The Korthak weren't just destroying buildings. They were systematically burning every field, every greenhouse, every growing thing on the planet. They're targeting the evacuation sites, Lieutenant Park reported, his voice tight with horror. The Korthak are shooting at civilian transports. 12,000 people died in 4 hours. Not soldiers, not fighters, farmers, teachers, children, and elderly colonists who couldn't run fast enough. The lucky ones died quickly in the initial strikes. Others burned in collapsed buildings or suffocated in the poisoned atmosphere. When it was over, New Geneva was a smoking wasteland. The Korthak landed their mining equipment on ground still hot from bombardment, setting up operations among the ashes of human dreams. 3 days later, Ambassador Sarah Chen requested an emergency session of the Galactic Council. She sat in her small chair at the end of the table, her face calm as she waited for permission to speak. Council Leader Thane looked at her with barely concealed irritation. The human representative wishes to address the council. We will allow 3 minutes. Sarah stood up slowly. Her voice was quiet, but it carried clearly through the chamber. The Terran Federation formally withdraws from all galactic treaties, effective immediately. We hereby declare a state of total war against the Korthak Empire and any species that aids them. The chamber erupted in laughter. The Zephyrian representative actually applauded. Humans declaring war? What will you fight us with? Farming equipment and mining tools? General Krekstar's voice boomed across the room. The Empire is terrified. We tremble before human anger. His words were dripping with mockery. Even the diplomatic Villani seemed amused. Ambassador Sindar's tentacles moved in patterns that indicated humor. My dear humans, perhaps you should reconsider. War is not a game for children. Sarah waited for the laughter to die down. Then she spoke again, and this time her voice was cold as deep space. For 50 years, we have been patient, we have been peaceful, we have been forgiving. The galaxy has mistaken these qualities for weakness. She looked around the chamber. meeting the eyes of representatives from dozens of species. You have taught us that the universe only respects strength. You have shown us that mercy is a luxury the weak cannot afford. You have demonstrated that in galactic politics, only the ruthless survive. The laughter was starting to fade, as something in Sarah's tone penetrated their arrogance. We learned these lessons well, she continued. The Korthak Empire murdered 12,000 human civilians. They destroyed 20 years of peaceful development in a single morning. They did this not for military necessity, but to send a message about human worthlessness. Sarah picked up her datapad and walked toward the chamber exit. At the doorway, she turned back one final time. The message was received, she said. Now we will send our reply. As the chamber doors closed behind her, the galaxy's most dangerous war was about to begin. And for the first time in 50 years, humanity was done playing by everyone else's rules. Admiral Voskon of the Korthak Third Fleet was not worried about humans. His battle group consisted of 47 warships, including 6 heavy dreadnoughts that could crack planets in half. They were approaching the human mining colony of Kepler-7, expecting to find frightened civilians and perhaps a few outdated patrol boats. The humans had been declaring war for 2 weeks now, and the Korthak military was still laughing about it. General Krextar had made sure every fleet commander knew about the human threat, mostly so they could share the joke with their crews. Sensors show the human colony ahead, Admiral, reported his tactical officer. No defensive fleet detected. They appear to be defenseless. Voskon nodded. This would be quick and easy, just like New Geneva. Another lesson for the galaxy about the cost of challenging the Empire. Signal the fleet. Standard bombardment formation. We'll make this fast. The Korthak ships moved into attack positions around Kepler-7. The planet looked like any other human settlement. Small cities, industrial complexes, and lots of mining equipment scattered across the surface. Nothing that looked remotely military. Admiral, the sensor operator called out suddenly, I'm detecting some kind of interference. Our long-range communications just went dead. That was strange, but not alarming. Probably some natural phenomenon. Continue with the attack. We can report back when we're finished here. The fleet opened fire on the planet below. Energy beams and kinetic rounds poured down from orbit, destroying anything that looked important. It was exactly the same tactics they had used on New Geneva. Overwhelming firepower applied without mercy. For 10 minutes, everything went according to plan. Then the human ships appeared. They didn't come from the planet. They didn't jump in from hyperspace. They simply materialized around the Korthak fleet as if they had been hiding in empty space itself. 63 vessels of unknown design, moving with impossible coordination. Where did they come from? Voskon roared. Sensors, how did we miss an entire fleet? I don't know, Admiral. They weren't there 5 seconds ago. The human ships didn't look like any military vessels in the galactic databases. They were sleek and smooth, with no visible weapons or armor. They moved more like living creatures than machines, flowing around the Korthak fleet in complex patterns. Voskon recovered his composure quickly. Numbers don't matter. We have superior firepower. All ships target the human vessels and fire at will. The Korthak fleet unleashed everything they had. Plasma cannons, quantum torpedoes, and particle beams filled space with deadly energy. Any normal fleet would have been vaporized in seconds. The human ships weren't touched. Every shot missed, not because the humans were dodging. The energy beams and projectiles simply passed through empty space where the ships had been microseconds before. It was as if the humans could predict exactly where every attack would go and position themselves somewhere else. Admiral, our weapons are having no effect, the tactical officer reported, fear creeping into his voice. Before Voskon could respond, the human ships began their own attack. But they didn't use energy weapons or missiles. Instead, they released what looked like small metal spheres, hundreds of them, drifting toward the Korthak fleet like harmless debris. "Point defenses. Destroy those objects," Voskan ordered. The spheres were obliterated by laser fire. But as each one exploded, it released a cloud of something that looked like silver dust. The dust drifted through space, seemingly harmless, until it reached the Korthak ships. The first hull breach was on the cruiser Bloodfang. The silver dust ate through the armor plating like acid, creating perfectly circular holes that vented atmosphere and crew into space. Within minutes, the entire ship was Swiss cheese. Then it spread to the next ship and the next. The dust seemed to reproduce itself, creating more and more holes in everything it touched. Ships that had survived a dozen battles were dissolving like ice cubes in hot water. "Admiral, we need to retreat immediately," his second-in-command urged. "We're losing half the fleet." But retreat wasn't possible. When Voskan tried to activate the hyperspace drives, nothing happened. The humans had somehow cut off their escape route. The Korthak fleet was trapped with an enemy they couldn't hit, couldn't understand, and couldn't escape. The battle lasted 6 more hours. When it was over, 47 Korthak warships had been reduced to expanding clouds of debris and frozen corpses. Not a single human ship had been damaged. But the humans weren't finished. 3 days later, a single human vessel appeared in orbit around Korth Prime, the heavily fortified capital world of the Empire. It broadcast a message on all frequencies, ensuring everyone in the system could hear it. The voice was calm and polite, speaking in perfect Korthak language. "This is Commander Sarah Chen of the Terran Federation Navy. We are returning your dead." What came down from orbit wasn't weapons or troops. It was the wreckage of Admiral Voskan's fleet, twisted metal and frozen bodies arranged in perfect geometric patterns across the planet's 3 moons. Every piece of debris had been positioned with mathematical precision to spell out a message visible from the planet's surface. In letters 10 kilometers tall, written in the corpses of Korthak warriors, the message read, "You started this." The psychological effect was devastating. Korthak soldiers who saw the display began requesting transfers to other sectors. Some simply deserted. The Empire's military recruitment dropped by 60% overnight. But the humans still weren't done. Within a month, every Korthak supply depot in 5-star systems had been destroyed. Not captured, completely annihilated by unknown means. Entire battle groups would wake up to find their ammunition ships missing, their fuel tankers gone, their repair facilities reduced to floating scrap. The Korthak tried to adapt. They sent out scout ships to watch for human attacks. The scouts never reported back. They deployed early warning systems around critical installations. The systems detected nothing until the explosions started. Most terrifying of all were the psychological operations. Korthak crews would receive audio messages on their private communication channels, recordings of their own families back home, talking about their daily lives, proving that human agents could reach anyone, anywhere, anytime. The message was clear. You are not safe. Your families are not safe. We know where you sleep. General Krextar, the architect of the New Geneva massacre, was found dead in his private quarters on the most secure military station in the Empire. There were no signs of struggle, no evidence of how anyone had gotten inside. He had simply died in his sleep, and on his desk was a single flower, the same type that had grown in the fields of New Geneva before they burned. The Zephyrian Alliance, initially neutral in the human-Korthak conflict, made the mistake of selling advanced weapons to the Empire. They thought it was easy profit from a distant war. They were wrong. 7 Zephyrian research facilities across their territory experienced accidents on the same day, reactor meltdowns, gravity generator failures, and computer viruses that turned automated systems against their operators. The facilities were completely destroyed, along with decades of technological research. There was no evidence of human involvement. No ships detected, no agents captured, no traces of sabotage. But the message arrived at Zephyrian headquarters exactly 1 hour after the last explosion. Neutrality means not helping our enemies. Choose wisely. The Zephyrians immediately cancelled all contracts with the Korthak Empire. As news of these events spread throughout the galaxy, a terrible realization began to dawn on the other species. The humans hadn't been weak for 50 years. Every insult, every dismissal, every casual cruelty had been carefully noted and filed away. The quiet, helpful humans had been studying their enemies, learning their weaknesses, mapping their territories, infiltrating their societies, building weapons and strategies that no one had imagined. The galaxy had laughed at human declarations of war. Now they were starting to understand that humans didn't make threats. The emergency session of the Galactic Council was the largest gathering in the organization's history. Representatives from every major species had come to Nexus Prime, along with delegates from dozens of minor worlds and trading unions. The massive assembly hall was packed with beings who had never shown interest in politics before. They were all here because of the humans. Council leader Thane looked older than his 800 years as he called the session to order. A massive Korthak's voice had lost its usual arrogant tone. We are gathered here to address the situation that has developed in our galaxy. Ambassador Sindar of the Volani floated at the center of the chamber, his tentacles moving in patterns that indicated deep concern. In 6 months, the humans have destroyed 40% of the Korthak military. Entire fleets have simply vanished. Industrial capacity has been reduced to nothing. This is not normal warfare. The Drakmaran representative, a scaled being with 4 arms, leaned forward in his seat. My species has been reviewing our historical interactions with humans. We now realize that every trade negotiation, every territorial dispute, every resource allocation, the humans were deliberately losing. They could have demanded better terms, but they chose not to. Why? Asked the avian Skrell delegate, her feathers ruffling with nervousness. What were they planning? Captain Torres of the Rimworld Alliance stood up. His people had worked closely with humans for decades. They were studying us, learning our weaknesses, our military tactics, our economic dependencies. Every time we pushed them around, we were teaching them how to hurt us later. The chamber erupted in worried chatter, as species after species began sharing similar realizations. The Zephyrians had discovered that their superior technology had been carefully studied by human scientists who posed as trade workers. The merchant guilds found that humans had detailed maps of every shipping route, every supply depot, every economic choke point in their networks. Most disturbing of all were the psychological profiles. Human diplomats had been quietly documenting the personalities, fears, and motivations of every leader they met. They knew exactly which species would panic under pressure, which alliances would crumble during crisis, and which governments would collapse if their economies were disrupted. They played the long game, whispered the crystalline Vorthon representative. 50 years of patient preparation, while we treated them like servants. Ambassador Krall of the Trade Federation pulled up holographic displays showing economic data. Look at these shipping manifests. For decades, humans have been requesting transport to worlds we thought were worthless. Barren planets, asteroid fields, empty systems. We gave them these assignments because nobody else wanted them. The displays showed the truth. Those worthless locations were actually perfect staging areas for military operations. Hidden bases positioned at strategic points throughout galactic civilization. The humans had built a secret empire while everyone was laughing at their weakness. How many bases? Asked the Korthak leader, his voice barely a whisper. We don't know, Krall replied. Our long-range sensors have detected artificial structures in 17 systems that should be empty. There could be dozens more we haven't found. The Zephyrian military advisor, General Quelnas, activated another set of holograms. We've been analyzing the human attacks on our research facilities. Simultaneous strikes across 6 star systems, timed to the second. Either they have faster-than-light communication we've never seen before, or what? Thane demanded. Or they have agents already in place throughout our territory, sleeper cells that have been waiting for activation orders. The implications were staggering. If humans had spent 50 years infiltrating galactic society, there was no telling how deep their network went. They could have people in every government, every military, every corporation. We need to work together, declared Ambassador Veltar of the Zephyrian Alliance. No single species can face this threat alone. We must combine our fleets and resources. For once, the usually fractured council was in complete agreement. Within hours, they had hammered out the details of the largest military alliance in galactic history. 15 major powers would contribute ships, weapons, and personnel to create a force of unprecedented size. The Korthok provided heavy assault vessels and experienced crews. The Zephyrians contributed advanced technology and shield systems. The Volani offered strategic coordination and intelligence networks. Even traditionally peaceful species like the Vorthans agreed to supply support ships and logistics. 3 months later, the Grand Alliance fleet assembled at the Kepler Nexus. 12,000 warships, representing the combined might of most of known civilization. It was the largest military force ever brought together, capable of reducing entire star systems to rubble. Admiral Thexmore, a veteran Zephyrian commander, stood on the bridge of the flagship Unity and surveyed the massive fleet through the viewport. Ships stretched to the horizon in every direction. Massive dreadnoughts, swift cruisers, carriers loaded with fighter craft, and support vessels carrying enough supplies to sustain operations for years. "Admiral," his tactical officer reported, "all fleet elements are in position. We are ready to proceed to the target system." The target was Kepler-7, the human mining colony where the first major battle had taken place. Intelligence suggested it was now a major hub for human military operations. The plan was simple: overwhelming force, applied with precision and speed. The humans had shown they could defeat individual fleets, but surely they couldn't stand against the entire galaxy. "Signal all ships," Admiral Thexmore ordered. "Jump to hyperspace on my mark." The Grand Alliance fleet entered hyperspace and traveled for 6 hours toward their destination. When they arrived at Kepler-7, they were confident that nothing could stop them. They were wrong. The fleet dropped out of hyperspace into what should have been empty space around the human colony. But there was no planet visible, no orbital installations, no sign that anything had ever been there. "Sensors, where is the target world?" the Admiral demanded. "Sir, I'm detecting massive debris fields where the planet should be," came the confused reply. "It appears the humans destroyed their own colony." That was impossible. No species willingly destroyed their own worlds. But as the fleet moved closer, they found the wreckage of what had once been a thriving human settlement. Everything had been systematically demolished. Cities reduced to rubble, industrial facilities torn apart, even the mining tunnels collapsed. "Admiral, incoming transmission on all frequencies," the communications officer announced. "It's from somewhere in the system." The main screen activated, showing a human woman in a simple uniform. She looked familiar. Several delegates recognized her as Ambassador Sarah Chen, the quiet diplomat they had ignored for years. "Welcome to Kepler-7, she said with a slight smile. "Or what's left of it. We knew you were coming, so we cleaned up before your arrival." Admiral Thexmore stepped forward. "Surrender now, and your people will be treated with mercy. You cannot hope to defeat a fleet of this size." Sarah's smile grew wider. "You're absolutely right, Admiral. We could never win a direct battle against 12,000 warships." She paused, looking directly at the camera. "That's why we already won before you got here." "What do you mean?" Fexmore demanded. Check your fuel reserves, Sarah suggested politely. Alarm klaxons began sounding throughout the fleet. On ship after ship, engineering crews were reporting the same impossible news. Their fuel tanks were empty. Not depleted, completely empty, as if the fuel had simply vanished. Check your ammunition stores, Sarah continued. More alarms. Weapons officers across the fleet confirmed that their missile tubes were empty, their energy weapon capacitors were drained, and their spare parts were missing. Check your food supplies. The pattern continued. Everything the fleet needed to operate, fuel, weapons, food, water, replacement parts, medical supplies, had mysteriously disappeared during their hyperspace journey. The Grand Alliance fleet, the most powerful military force in galactic history, was now completely helpless. 12,000 warships drifting in space with no way to fight, no way to retreat, and no way to survive for more than a few days. How? Admiral Fexmore whispered. 50 years of preparation, Sarah replied. We knew this day would come. We knew exactly how you would respond. Every supply ship that serviced your fleet, every depot where you loaded provisions, every maintenance crew that worked on your vessels, we made sure our people were there, waiting. The screen showed images of human workers in coveralls and uniforms, people who had been dismissed as servants and laborers for decades. Now they revealed themselves as the most sophisticated intelligence operation in galactic history. You taught us that strength is the only thing that matters, Sarah continued. So we became strong. You taught us that the weak get crushed, so we made sure we would never be weak again. A single human frigate appeared on the fleet's sensors, approaching slowly. It was smaller than any ship in the Grand Alliance fleet, but in the current situation, it might as well have been a dreadnought. We're sending transport shuttles, Sarah announced. You can surrender now and be taken to processing centers, or you can drift here until your life support fails. The choice is yours. Admiral Fexmore looked around his bridge at officers who had been confident of victory just moments ago. Now they were prisoners without bars, defeated without a single shot being fired. The galaxy had learned an important lesson. Humans didn't fight fair. 2 years after the Grand Alliance fleet's surrender, the Galactic Council convened for its first regular session under the new order. The chamber looked the same, but everything else had changed. Ambassador Sarah Chen now sat at the head of the curved table, in the seat that had once belonged to the council leader. She wore the same simple blue uniform she had always worn, but nobody in the chamber could ignore her presence anymore. Every representative watched her carefully, waiting for any sign of her mood or intentions. The humans had been efficient in their conquest. The Korthak Empire no longer existed as a political entity. Their homeworld was empty but intact, a monument to what happened when a species crossed certain lines. The population had been relocated to agricultural worlds where they worked under strict supervision, learning what it meant to be at the mercy of others. The Zephyrian Alliance had been dismantled and reorganized into smaller, independent systems. Their advanced technology was now shared freely throughout the galaxy, under human oversight. The merchant guilds operated under new regulations that emphasized fairness and transparency. The military powers found their fleets reduced to patrol boats and rescue ships. Today's agenda covers several routine matters, Sarah announced, her voice calm and professional. First, the quarterly report on reconstruction efforts in former Korthak territory. Ambassador Veltar of the Zephyrians stood to deliver his report. The proud being who had once dismissed human concerns now spoke with careful respect. The agricultural programs are proceeding ahead of schedule. Former military personnel have adapted well to farming duties. Psychological evaluations show decreased aggression and improved cooperation. Sarah nodded. Any disciplinary issues? 3 minor incidents of insubordination, quickly resolved through additional education sessions. No serious problems to report. The Villani representative, Ambassador Sindar, raised one tentacle. If I may ask, how long will these rehabilitation programs continue? Sarah considered the question. Until we're satisfied that the cultural changes are permanent. The Korthak spent millennia believing that strength justified cruelty. Such attitudes don't change overnight. Around the table, other representatives shifted uncomfortably. Many of their own species had held similar beliefs not too long ago. Next item, Sarah continued, the Outer Rim Development Project. This was one of the more positive changes under human administration. The frontier regions that had been fought over for centuries were now being transformed into thriving communities. Former soldiers from dozens of species worked together on construction projects, building cities and industries under human guidance. The results were impressive. Worlds that had been battlegrounds now produced food and manufactured goods. Species that had been enemies for generations were learning to cooperate. Crime rates had dropped dramatically across the galaxy. The project is 40% ahead of schedule, reported the Drakmaran delegate. Mixed species work crews have shown remarkable efficiency. We're requesting permission to expand the program to 12 additional systems. Approved, Sarah said without hesitation. Submit the details to the Human Development Authority for resource allocation. It was a pattern that had emerged across galactic civilization. Humans didn't micromanage every decision, but they controlled the big picture. Trade routes, military deployments, resource distribution, technology sharing, all of it flowed through human oversight. The system worked because humans had proven they understood the galaxy better than the galaxy understood itself. Their decades of observation and analysis had given them insights that previous leaders had never achieved. But underneath the efficiency and prosperity, everyone knew what maintained the new order: fear. The humans had never officially threatened anyone since their war with the Korthak. They didn't need to. The galaxy had seen what happened to species that pushed too hard against human interests. The message was clear. Cooperation brought benefits, while opposition brought consequences. Is there any other business? Sarah asked, looking around the chamber. The Skrell representative, Ambassador Kexay, nervously preened her feathers before speaking. There have been some concerns expressed about the monitoring protocols in civilian areas. Some citizens feel that the level of surveillance is excessive. Sarah's expression didn't change, but several delegates tensed. Questions about human security measures were always dangerous territory. Which specific protocols are causing concern? Sarah asked politely. The communication monitoring, the movement tracking, the behavioral analysis programs, Kexai explained. People understand the need for security, but they wonder if such extensive measures are still necessary. Sarah was quiet for a moment, considering her response. 2 years ago, 12,000 warships filled with species ready to destroy human civilization appeared in our space. They were defeated not through superior firepower, but because we had better information. We knew their plans, their resources, their weaknesses. She looked directly at Kexai. How do you think we acquired that information? The Skrell delegate said nothing. The surveillance systems are punishment, Sarah continued. They're insurance. The galaxy has shown us repeatedly that peaceful intentions can change overnight. We will not be caught off guard again. The chamber remained silent. Everyone understood the real message. The humans trusted no one completely, not even their allies. They had learned that lesson too well. However, Sarah added, the protocols can be adjusted for species that demonstrate consistent cooperation and stability. Submit a formal request through proper channels, and we'll review the Skrell territories for possible modifications. Kexai bowed gratefully. Thank you for your consideration. As the session ended and delegates began filing out, Ambassador Sindar approached Sarah's position. The Villani's tentacles moved in patterns of respectful inquiry. Ambassador Chen, may I ask a personal question? Sarah looked up from her datapad. Of course. Do you ever miss the old days? When humans were less prominent in galactic affairs? Sarah considered the question carefully. Do you mean when we were ignored, insulted, and pushed around? I mean when the galaxy was more chaotic. When there were multiple power centers, shifting alliances, constant negotiations. Some historians argue it was more dynamic. Sarah's smile was thin. Dynamic is one word for it. 12,000 dead humans on New Geneva might use a different word. But surely you understand the appeal of a less controlled system. The freedom to make mistakes, to pursue individual goals without oversight. Sarah stood up and walked to the chamber's main viewing window. Outside, ships from dozens of species moved in organized patterns through Nexus Prime's orbital traffic lanes. Trade vessels, passenger liners, and diplomatic craft, all following carefully planned routes that eliminated conflicts and accidents. Tell me, Ambassador, Sarah said without turning around. In the old system, how many wars were fought over the Outer Rim territories? 7 major conflicts in the past 2 centuries, Sindar admitted. How many civilians died in those wars? Approximately 40 million. And how many wars have been fought there in the past 2 years? None. Sarah turned back to face the Valani diplomat. That's the difference between freedom and chaos. The galaxy had its chance to govern itself fairly for thousands of years. You chose to prey on the weak, reward the ruthless, and call it natural order. She walked back to her seat and began gathering her papers. We offered you an alternative. A system based on cooperation, fairness, and mutual benefit. You laughed at us. So we gave you a third option. A system based on efficiency, security, and human oversight. And if we had chosen the second option? Sindar asked quietly. Sarah paused in her packing. Then we would still be the quiet, helpful species sitting at the end of the table, grateful for whatever scraps you threw our way. She finished organizing her materials and headed toward the exit. At the doorway, she stopped and looked back at the empty chamber. The galaxy taught us that nice guys finish last, she said. So we stopped being nice guys. After Sarah left, Sindar remained alone in the chamber for several minutes. Through the viewing window, he could see the orderly flow of traffic, the prosperous trade stations, and the peaceful coexistence of species that had been enemies for millennia. It was exactly what the galaxy had always claimed to want: peace, prosperity, and cooperation. The only difference was who was in charge. The humans had given the galaxy everything it had asked for. The price was simply admitting that they had been wrong about who deserved to rule. As Sindar finally left the chamber, he passed a memorial plaque that had been installed near the entrance. It was dedicated to the humans who had died on New Geneva and other colonies during the dark years before the change. The inscription was simple. They tried to be your friends. You chose to make them your masters. The galaxy was learning to live with its choice, and every day, that lesson became a little bit easier to accept. After all, the trains ran on time, the peace held, and nobody had to worry about their children dying in someone else's war. Even if the cost was admitting that humanity had been right all along.